There are about 529 municipal courts in this state. For most New Jerseyans, municipal court is the only one they'll ever deal with. Our courts handle about 6 million cases, which make them arguably the most important court in the state, and the one that most people look at to determine the quality of our justice system. Now, while municipal courts are of a limited jurisdiction, in other words, they handle a limited type of cases, many people think that municipal courts are just traffic courts. Well, municipal courts handle, in addition to parking tickets and moving violations, DWI cases, minor criminal matters, and municipal ordinance violations, and the occasional neighbor versus neighbor dispute. So today on Know Your Rights New Jersey, we seek to gain a better knowledge and understanding of how the municipal court works, and how, for New Jerseyans, for you, you can better handle municipal court either as a victim, witness, plaintiff, or defendant. And to that end, today we have with us as our first guest for the show, Kim Otis. Kim Otis is a partner with Harrison and Otis, a general practice firm in Princeton. He is currently a certified criminal trial attorney, but previously worked as a prosecutor, in fact, the chief of the sexual assault and child abuse unit out of the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office. In addition, he was municipal prosecutor for 15 years, serving Pennington, Montgomery Township, and the Princetons before they were consolidated. So I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Kim Otis.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for appearing. Obviously, you have a wealth of experience and on both sides of the litigation table. But let's start with the prosecutor, your prosecutorial experience. How did you become a prosecutor and why?
I always wanted to be a prosecutor ever since I was a young boy, actually. And when I got out of law school, I clerked for a year, and then there was an opportunity to work for Phil Karchman, who was actually a municipal judge here in Princeton before he was appointed the prosecutor for Mercer County, and he hired me to be an assistant prosecutor, and I worked in that office for 4 years, and as you mentioned, became in charge of the sexual assault and child abuse unit. So that's how I got involved in the criminal law and prosecuting.
Right. What about municipal court prosecuting? Well, how did you get involved in that?
Well, after I left the prosecutor's office with my partner, Hal Havison, who's also was a prosecutor at the time,
right,
we opened a firm here in Princeton, and we started a general practice firm, but we both had experience in criminal law, of course. So we started defending people in municipal court. We also did superior court defense work and federal court defense work. But a lot of your bread and butter is work is in the municipal courts throughout the state, and for all these years I've been doing that as a part of my practice.
Now, as a prosecutor for the townships, what exactly did you do? What does a prosecutor do?
Well, as you know, I was appointed a prosecutor of a number of towns, and in many ways the prosecutor runs the courtroom in terms of how the cases are going to be handled. He meets with all the attorneys beforehand to see if they can be worked out. He talks with people who don't have attorneys, and he or she then works out plea bargains, presents those to the court, goes through those, and if there are cases that cannot be worked out, he then tries those cases, he or she tries those cases to the judge. So each session, you're really running the show in terms of figuring out what cases might have to be tried, what cases can be worked out, who has attorneys, and what kind of plea bargains are going to be drawn up and made and presented to the judge.
Now, did you find any difference between dealing with non-attorney litigants, litigants with attorneys, and at this, students, because you were also prosecuting students in the university setting?
Yes, that's true. Well, would always recommend that if you're going to go to municipal court, and especially if it's in any way a serious matter, but almost if it's whatever it is, if you can afford an attorney, you should do so. In the long run, it's going to save you money and it's going to protect your rights the best. Now, if you cannot afford an attorney, I mean, in certain cases, you can get a court-appointed public defender. However, that's not actually free. You do pay $200 for the public defender, and you really have to be unemployed or otherwise, you know, making very little money in order to qualify for a public defender. But everyone does have a chance at some point to speak to the prosecutor, even if you don't have an attorney. And if you wait your turn, the prosecutor will eventually speak to you and try and work your case out. The problem, of course, is a lot of people aren't sure, you know, what they want or what they should be looking to try and do. But if you have a pretty minor, say, traffic offense charge of a minor speeding or, say, going through a red light where there's no accident, you could go to the municipal court judge, and it's possible, if without an attorney, that you could work it out to get a no-point ticket, which can save you ultimately a lot of money in terms of surcharges with the Division of Motor Vehicles and other problems. It is possible to do that in working and talking with the prosecutor.
What difficulties have you found in working with non-attorney litigants?
Well, sometimes the difficulties are that they're very emotional and or angry, or they're not able to really listen or communicate because of their feelings.
Because they're emotionally spent, and
they're also very nervous, or they feel that they've been wronged in some way. So a lot of times, just the situation is not very conducive towards communication between two people. Sometimes they don't trust you, and I can understand that. I mean, my job is to prosecute them. Right. Their job, they want to try and get at least a good deal if they are guilty, or have the charge dismissed if they have some defense that they want to present. So, but I think that a lot of times also when people go to municipal court, they try and say too much. They start giving you their entire life history and how they were a perfect baby and a wonderful child, and they've done this and that. And as a prosecutor, you're not interested in any of that. You want to get right to the issue and the facts that's, you know, involved in the case. And whether they're a great person or not is really not relevant to whether or not they're guilty of speeding, drunk driving, a simple assault, shoplifting, or whatever it may be.
Have you had to handle the litigant or the defendant that has felt so wronged that they would go totally to the mat and to trial, even though it was clear that they did something wrong?
Yes, sure. Although most people try and be reasonable and understand, most people know when they are guilty. They want to get something out of it if they can, and a lot of times they're entitled to that. But you do have people sometimes who come in very aggressive, with a very aggressive attitude, and they can be their own worst enemies. They come across with so much hostility, or they are talking so fast, or talking so much about stuff that's irrelevant, that they end up hurting themselves in terms of the prosecutor not wanting to deal with them, and even the judge becoming frustrated.
But isn't that also true with how they deal with the court staff? Because isn't the staff a team? The prosecutor and the court staff is a team.
Yes,
and people will come in with the same attitude throughout.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's very important to remember that the staff is really connected to the judge. When you're talking to court staff, you should feel in your heart that you are talking to the judge himself, and act in that way. And that will go a long way towards helping you. If you show respect and don't be demanding or curt or otherwise angry at them. After all, they didn't give you the ticket. If it was done improperly, you know, it was a police officer who did that, and there's no connection between the police and the court.
But would you say that sometimes the possibility for resolution, a positive resolution of your case, actually begins with how you treat the police officer?
Absolutely, because when you come to court, the police officer will either have made a note of some kind, perhaps on the ticket, or he will come up and speak to the prosecutor about your case. And if he says to the prosecutor, this guy or this woman was unbelievably rude and difficult, I couldn't even get a word in edgewise before she or he started yelling at me, and I am not interested in giving them any kind of a break. Well, as a prosecutor, that's the hard thing. I like to sometimes, even though that they would say that, I'd often like to say to them, well, okay, I hear you, but look, everyone has to be treated as fairly and similarly as we can. But of course, it's not going to help you if you antagonize the police officer, because in one way or another, he's going to try and let the prosecutor know that.
So let's do a quick switch of hats for you. Right now, you're, as we mentioned, you're a certified criminal trial attorney. What do you tell your clients who are going into municipal court when they come into you generally?
Well, I generally tell them that I want them to trust me and to let me do most of the talking. I want them to be prepared and to understand what's going to be happening, but I don't want them to take too active a role, actually, unless we're going to trial and I have to prepare them for their testimony, because the fact is that it's really the defense attorney talking to the prosecutor without your client there where the deal is going to be struck. And so most of the time when you hire an attorney, you're basically turning your case over to that attorney and putting your situation in his or her hands and hoping for the best, which you will get usually. But you have to have faith that that person's going to communicate to the prosecutor your side of the story.
And do you find the need to talk to your clients about making sure they tell you the truth and that you are letting them know that you are their partner in this and that there are things that they must do in order for you to be successful?
Yes, of course. I mean, if your client lies to you and you have to take whatever they say at face value and that's what you present to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor knows something and therefore knows that what you're saying your client said is a lie, your ability to in any way negotiate with the prosecutor at that point is out the window. I mean, why would a prosecutor negotiate with you when they know that you're not even presenting the truth or your side of the story honestly to him? So, if you're truthful with your attorney can always choose not to say certain things to the prosecutor. He doesn't have to go in and say, well, my client said this and that and the other thing. Because, you can choose certain aspects of what you've been told and try and present it in the best way possible. But it's a very big mistake to lie to your attorney. It creates a bad relationship because most of the time an experienced attorney knows if you've been lying and if you are lying to him or her. And so it's really a bad way to run that relationship.
Well, with that said, we're going to pause for a break. Welcome back. We return with a very special treat, a former municipal judge who was not only instrumental in teaching other judges, but played a role in the development of the municipal court system. Judge Russell Annich was a judge in Plainsboro for 5 years, Princeton Township for 19 years, and Princeton Borough for 28. So this is a great opportunity, and thank you. We welcome you, Judge.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, let's start with why you became a judge and how you became a municipal court judge.
Well, I started my law practice in Newark at a large law firm, and after a couple of years, I came to Princeton and with the firm of Mason, Griffin, and Pearson. And Gordon Griffin was the attorney for both the borough and the township. And as part of his services, he provided a prosecutor to the courts. And that job always went to the newest associate, the idea being that I wanted to get some exposure to the community. So I became the prosecutor in Princeton Borough for a good number of years. And then the judge, as was previously mentioned, Judge Karchman, left to go to the prosecutor's office. And by that time, I was so interested in what was going on in the court that I was interested in applying for the judgeship, and I was appointed. I was very happy about that.
Happy enough to stay for at least 28 years.
Well, no. I actually didn't think that I had this idea that it was going to be interesting to be a judge, and it was going to be fun to be a judge, but that I would only stay for a certain period of time, and then when it got to the point where I was no longer interested in it, then I was going to step aside. That was always my philosophy, but it never happened because the job kept evolving and the responsibilities kept evolving, and I didn't get a feeling of being burned out.
How did the responsibilities evolve from when you first started?
Oh, in the beginning, the municipal court has always been the stepchild of the larger court system, and it started back in revolutionary days. But when I came in, you were appointed by the municipality, and they paid your salary, and you were responsible to the administrative office of the courts,
Right.
but there was very little oversight. So, you know, so the judge had a lot of discretion. I had more flexibility in terms of being able to do my job than a superior court judge. And you know, the municipality thought that I was being overseen by the administrative office of the courts, and they were happy to have the municipality pay my salary, and that's the way it was. Now it's entirely different. I mean, over the years it's changed, and the accountability is very, very serious and severe.
Now, would you say that based upon how you described the earlier years, was there a lack of uniformity from municipality to municipality in terms of how the courts operated?
Yeah, each of the judges had great latitude in terms of the way they ran their courts. And some of them were very good, and some of them were not so good.
I wanted to ask you, as a judge, what are your pet peeves in terms of litigants and attorneys that appear before you, and how have they developed over the years, or have they always been the same?
Well, litigants are just you just have no idea who's going to show up as a litigant, and there are all kinds of aberrational activities that you have to deal with. And the attorneys, really, there's a core of attorneys that are familiar with the court and know their way around. And there's nobody that would fit that more than Kim Otis. So if he knows what's going on and he has a feel for the judge and for the history, and he knows the officers, and he knows the body language, and those are the kinds of attorneys that you like to work with because they get the job done.
Well, let's talk about non-attorney litigants. For them, are there things that they can do to make their matters worse than what they really are?
Oh, sure. If they're not represented by a lawyer, they generally have a very strongly held position, and they have a story that they want to tell, and that story may not have any relevance to what we're working on, and I want to cut them off. I try to do it gently, but they're frustrated because they can't get their story out. And nobody else wants to hear the story. And there's an overriding theme in terms of the way I like to run the court, and I don't think I have ever articulated it before, but on any given day, we have a finite amount of work that has to be done. It's not, and it could be a small calendar, it could be a little calendar, or with big cases, but there's a finite amount of work that needs to be done. And we're there until it's finished, for the most part. And when it starts in the morning, the whole courtroom is filled up with people, and everybody wants to have their case heard. My goal was always to get the calendar finished in the most dignified way, but it had to be organized the way I wanted it to be organized, and it had to move. And my feeling of that was that people who come to court, if they could see that the calendar was moving, if they could see the judge was in control, if they could see that there were no distractions, they would sit back and behave themselves and wait for their turn. And there were definitely times when I wasn't able to keep that schedule, and you could feel the courtroom fall apart. I mean, people would start to get crabby and raise their hand and want to get adjournment or this and that, and it's very hard to recapture that once you would lose it. Do you?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I am.
And so, in terms of addressing the needs of the people that were going to be in court without lawyers, I wanted to show them that we were an organized, orderly court, and if they would just go along with us, be patient, their case would come up and they would be heard, and they might just watch what's happening to other people and get a sense of what they'd be dealing with when their turn came up. And
that's a really good point. I mean, for people to watch other cases is very instructive for them, and they can learn a lot because a lot of them are similar to their own case.
And they can figure out how they should interact with the court.
Yeah.
Time is running very quickly, and there are so many things that I would like to know, and I'm sure the public would like to know, but I'm going to cut to a question for both of you. What was your most difficult case before Judge Annich?
Well,
You're putting him on a spot.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I want people to tune into this show next week.
well, there were many, many difficult cases. Of course, I always felt that I was going to get a fair judgment from Judge Annich, and I thought that he knew the rules of evidence. He knew he understood the whole concept of proof beyond a reasonable doubt and what that meant and so forth. But I've had a lot of really crazy cases in front of him, including the Congo case with the dog that I had to ask. I was asking to have that dog put down, and it was a very challenging case. And the public was it was very difficult, I know, especially for Judge Annich to deal with
As a matter
that.
of fact, he had death threats, which was very horrible.
Yeah. I also had a very big case where I was a defense attorney, and I was representing two students who were officers in an eating club, and there was a initiation, and kids got very drunk and all had to go to the hospital, and these two officers were charged with providing alcohol to minors. And I went to a trial on that, and Judge Annich found them guilty, and he sentenced them to some time in prison, which was a shock beyond belief to me and to them. But anyway,
They learned their lesson.
They did. Of course, we did file an appeal, and eventually I was able to work it out where they didn't end up doing time, but it was extraordinarily powerful,
Right.
and it created a lot of press. So
What do you think,
those are
Judge?
two tough cases I had.
Well, I wanted to send a message, but I stayed the sentence, so the kids didn't actually
Yes,
go
you
to
did.
jail.
Thank you for that, Your Honor.
But the question of drinking at the university is with us always, and no matter how hard you work on it, it only has, if they catch on to it, it only has a half-life of 2 years, and you're dealing with a whole new crew the next time. But
Right.
I viewed this as not just an egregious situation, but I was offended by the attitude of the individual litigants.
And that goes back to what we were speaking
Yeah.
of before, how you can damage yourself
Yeah.
before the court.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, if you show that you have no respect for the law or don't care about our justice system, you're not going to make friends with judges and prosecutors. That's for sure.
Judge, what do you think was the most difficult case that came before you?
Oh, I don't know. The Congo case certainly was, but I have to search back.
Now, the
a
Congo
lot
case,
of-
for those who don't know, was the case where you sentenced a dog that had severely harmed a gentleman
Yeah.
to be euthanized, and the animal rights activists became very active, and it became quite a cause. I don't know if celebrate is the word, but
Well, it wasn't so much that I sentenced him to be euthanized. The law was, I made a finding of fact that he was, what was it, dangerous? Or
Yes, a
something?
danger to...
Dangerous. And then the law says, well, if once you make that finding of fact, then these things follow.
right.
And but everybody said, no, the judge sentenced them to death. Well, I guess it's just a matter of interpretation. But
Well, just for the record, eventually the dog did harm a family member, and
Yeah.
and the owner put the dog to sleep
Yes.
before having to go back to court again. Judge, how you mentioned that you continued to do it because it continued to be fun. But how? It seems like such a tough job. You have so many different people coming before you. You dealt with university students who can be very difficult, especially in drinking, with the drinking issue going on. How did it remain fun for you? And
well, fun is maybe not the right word. A lot of the work was very tedious and repetitive. But among them were very important cases that where I could see that I had an opportunity to be a positive influence in somebody's life, and that really made a difference for me. Particularly young people. I had a son. My son never did one thing that I asked him to do. Never, he was always in trouble. And I was very frustrated by that, but I thought, if I can help somebody else's son, I'm going to do it. And by wearing the black robe, if I can get their attention for 30 seconds, which is about all I'm going to have, and it'll make a difference, then that's a good thing. And I'd look and see if the parents were going, yeah. Or if they were glowering, then I'd say, well, never mind, it's not going to work. But those are the kinds of cases that made it worthwhile. And even little cases, the littlest case that you can think of, a parking ticket. People come up to me and say, Judge, I think you are the most wonderful judge in the world. You know, I really, and I'm sure you don't remember me, but your decision on my case was just so well thought out. I said, oh, I don't remember. What was your case? He said, it was a parking ticket. But these are the things that are important to people.
Absolutely right.
You know, and
their daily lives, absolutely.
And in the flow of the court, those things go by so quickly, and you don't want people to feel like they're just being swept along.
Well, gentlemen, I hope that our audience has learned quite a bit. I know I have, and in addition to that, I've learned that 30 minutes is far too little time to talk to either one of you. And I thank you both for appearing. Mr. Kim Otis, Judge Russell Annich, you have been watching Know Your Rights, New Jersey. We hope that you return next time. Thank you.
Nice being here.
Thank you.